Good day, everyone. We're here today for the latest excerpt from Fashion Network and Luxurynsight's podcasts with dynamic personalities in the fashion and luxury industry. And this morning we have the pleasure of meeting a star of the new generation, Anthony Alvarez of the label Bluemarble. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, Godfrey. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. For those who are not so well informed, Anthony is created his own label a couple of years ago and recently just got the distinction of becoming shortlisted for the ANDAM Prize, in some people's opinion, probably the most prestigious single prize for young designers in the world. But I'd like to begin at the beginning with the name of his brand. How did you come up with the name?
So I inspired myself from the first picture taken of the Earth in its entirety in 1972 that the astronauts called the Bluemarble. And for me, it's that perspective representing cultural diversity and a perspective of all of us being connected that really inspired me for my brand.
You were a part French, part Filipino, am I correct, but brought up in New York?
Yes, that's correct. My father is Filipino-Spanish, and he moved to New York at an early age. And my mother is from the south of France, and they met during my mother's first trip outside of France in Washington, and then I was born there.
You... When you were young, did you first get the idea that you might be a designer?
I had a dream of having my brand at a young age. I back then did a lot of, and I still do, outdoor sports. And I had this dream of having my outdoor sports clothing brand. And then it stayed in my head, but I didn't study that in high school or in college. I studied economics, which was quite different, quite the opposite actually. But it's always something that stayed in my head and that I've been passionate about from an early age.
And so you spent your formative teenage years where, in New York or Washington?
In New York. My parents just met in Washington, but I was born in New York and lived there until the age of 8 and moved back to Paris.
Okay. So where did you study business?
I studied, so I left when I was 17, France, to go back to New York to study at Cornell in New York.
Okay, like the movie Love Story.
Yes.
Very good. The designer Casey Cadwallader of Mugler, he also studied at Cornell,
yes,
but architecture. Well, it turns out it's a good school for fashion without you even studying the subject.
And very good for architecture as well. I did take a couple architecture classes at Cornell, and that's something I really loved about the U.S. General Studies is the fact that you can take a broad variety of courses that they call electives that complement your degree.
Okay. Now, tell me, what were your first steps in design itself?
The first steps in design were through my first project called One Culture that I launched with some friends in 2017. And it was really learning about everything, learning how to make fiche technique, learning how to communicate with manufacturers, trying to convince them to launch your small production. And it was really interesting because it was a complete new industry for me. And I was lucky enough to have friends that had experience, and I learned a lot through them.
So when did you decide, you showed originally with One Culture before you changed the name, is that correct? You presented a collection.
The first collection presented was actually for Bluemarble.
Okay.
For Bluemarble, okay. Which was the collection spring, summer 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One of your initial ideas, if I remember, I've seen a couple of your collections now, was that you would take the concept of a city and use that as the inspiration for the collection. What's your thinking behind that?
Yes, actually, for me, that concept was one of the main concepts of One Culture, was really to take inspiration from a particular city and every season travel to a new city and reflect coutume, the culture that was present in that city. But when I decided to launch Bluemarble in 2019, I wanted to keep those values of multiculturalism, of traveling, but without having it for a specific city every season, because I felt that we would it would be too marqué by a particular city, and I wanted to represent more the voyage in general and the adventure of kids traveling, discovering new cultures, playing sports, bringing souvenirs, and really celebrating together.
Okay. So now your fashion house is based here in Paris. Where?
We're based near République, between République and Bastille. And we have a small atelier there as well, where we make a few samples and a lot of our patrons.
Okay. And where do you make most of the collection?
Most of it's a mix between Portugal, Italy, and France.
Okay. One thing that you had a fantastic collection, I think everyone raved about. I think it's your last collection was in the Gare de Lyon, near the Gare de Lyon.
Yes, in the 12e.
In the 12e. What was, one of the inspirations was your own cultural background, the Venta boats.
Yes, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about the thinking behind that.
Sure. So this collection started with a dream that I've had to traverse the Pacific Ocean from the Philippines to the United States. And I've always practiced a lot of outdoor sports and water sports. And this was the idea of taking off on these beautiful Venta boats that have amazing colors and geometrical shapes. And it was this idea to traverse the winter through these boats and bringing elements of souvenirs I had from the Philippines and from surfing in Siargao. We created these post-surf boots, post-surf scarves as well. And taking elements from my cultural heritage, but also from this idea of traversing the Pacific and what I would want to bring with me along that trip.
Okay. One thing I think really strikes people about your fashion is, even though it's based on active sports like skateboarding or surfing, that you give it frequently a kind of couture-like finish, embroideries, crystals, things. What's your thinking behind that?
I like to mix my many different inspirations for my brand, and I think it comes from my upbringing, growing up in New York, having dreams through the American movies, through American sports, entertainment, but also my upbringing in France and through my mom, which has a certain sophistication, and I try to mix both of them for my collections. And I also am really passionate about artisanal craft, embroideries. I think it adds a human touch, which I continuously try to explore every season. So we had this idea of mixing a more modern design, baggy jeans, with traditional artisanal craft, all done by hand. And that was one of my favorite pieces last collection that I actually wore for the LVMH Prize, actually.
Yeah. Do you think that when growing up, or when you were thinking of becoming a designer or creating a brand, who were the designers you admired?
So growing up, I was exposed to my grandma. Actually, that was my first experience with fashion. My Filipino grandma that immigrated to the U.S. loved Japanese designers. So Comme des Garçons was one of the first brands that I experienced through her.
Ah. And did she wore them? She wore guys?
Yes, she wore a few pieces, and she would always show me pictures growing up on magazines, and it did make me dream a lot. And I still to this day remember that moment, because I think it's unforgettable when you are young, and seeing her passion as well, I think was communicated to me.
Wonderful. How does the creative process work with you? How do you begin a collection and develop the initial idea and concept?
There's a lot of research at the beginning for me, and I start with this idea of where I'd like to go. On a voyage, who I would like to go, my friends or people I would dream to be with, because there's this interesting inspiration that I have, not only from the friends and from what my friends would like to wear, what I would like to wear, but also from people that I would dream to be with. So there's also, as you mentioned, eccentricity in the collection. And I try to imagine these people together, what they would bring to the table, where they would go. I'd dig back into my souvenirs as well, and experiences of voyage growing up. And it starts with this idea of tying these dreams I have of the past, of the future, with this idea of escapism and voyage.
You know, I know we've just come out of a very complicated pandemic, but I always ask every designer I meet, where were the last 3 places they went on vacation? And I think it's especially important in the way you think about design. Where were those last 3?
So the last 3, it was my best friend's 30th birthday in Marrakesh, and I really love Morocco. Marrakesh, Essaouira, different cities. There's actually a place I want to go called Dakhla, which is really famous for kite surfing. Before that, it was Mexico, which also was my first time there, and I was really inspired a lot by their organic architecture that they have and psychedelic prints that I found there. And I think before that was Tarifa in the south of Spain, also for surfing.
Okay. That means, you sound like a regular surfer by now, are you? Or
yeah, I really love it. I all the water sports really I feel very passionate about.
Were you surprised at your reception by the industry, by LVMH Prize, ANDAM now? Why do you think that you were so readily accepted effectively?
I was very surprised because, as you mentioned, I don't come from a fashion background, and I really trust my intuition when I design. And I was just so happily surprised to see the reception from experts in the industry, reviews that we had as well. And I think it's just me being really honest with my inspirations, with where I want to go. And given the really amazing feedback we've been getting, it only persuades me to continue on that route.
So now you've built already a bit of a business. It's not Dior or Chanel, but you've built. How many stores are you selling in worldwide? How many accounts do you have?
Right now we have
Online,
about
offline, yeah.
25 accounts worldwide.
Very good.
I'm really happy. Yes, really happy with the developments. And it's stores that are spread out in the world as well, which is really nice.
Okay. The next step is next week, is it? The season? No, or in 2 weeks' time. When will you be showing your next collection?
It actually be next week. It'll be on the 21st here in Paris, and I'm so excited.
The opening day?
we're actually the opening show, the opening day. Yes.
Very good. And can you tell us where you're going to show, or are you keeping that? What's happening?
I can't say where we will show, but I'm really excited. It really represents, the summertime for me, and I'm very excited for this collection.
Where would you hope to see your brand in 5 years?
I think what's important for me is that we continue to stay true to our vision and staying very passionate. That's all I can hope for in the next 5 years or longer down the line.
Mm-hmm. Define Bluemarble.
Bluemarble is a celebration of multiculturalism. It's there's a lot of joy in the clothes. It's colorful. It's a mix of many different inspirations. And there's this effortless feeling also to the clothes, while keeping a sophisticated finishing as well.
You often spoken 3 or 4 times of multiculturalism. Do you think fashion then has a greater role in society in guiding people to have certain values and certain ideas?
I think fashion has a very important role, especially nowadays with the digitalization of fashion through social networks and how accessible it is. So I think the young generation really looks up to brands and to designers, and it is our role to promote our values.
We have a lot of young people who hope to get into the fashion industry and who listen to these podcasts. What bits of advice would you give them if they were embarking on a career?
I think it's one of, for me, the most important advice I received is to be very audacious with how you work, audacious with how you translate your vision, and make no compromises, and repeat. I think through being patient and repetition, your work will be seen.
Anthony Alvarez, been very nice talking to you.
So nice talking to you, Godfrey.